Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan and I'm here to talk to you about MVPs and how to build and launch them. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. Thanks for taking the time to join this webinar. I'm excited to talk to you about something that I believe is the essence of a PM's work, the MVP. So first, I'll shortly introduce myself, then we'll talk about what is an MVP and why we need it. Move on to talk about building it and finish with the launch and what happens next. So if everyone's ready, let's get started. So just before starting today's topic, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jonathan and I'm a happy product manager at Microsoft. I work on a product called Excel. I assume everyone knows. Excel is one of the most used programs in the world and it has a large team working on it. I focus on get and transform data area. I'm working on various initiatives related to importing and shaping data alongside improving the overall user experience. Before that, I worked for Autodesk, which is known for AutoCAD, and I also worked for RapNet, the world's largest diamond and jewelry marketplace. I also take part in product mentoring, and I'm part of the UX Collective, an initiative aimed at making content more accessible for product managers and product designers. Yes, that's the polar bear, and that's what it stands for. Feel free to check it out too. So what is an MVP? One of the most important concepts in tech is the minimum viable product, often referred to as MVP. After working in small and large companies and various stages, I can tell you that the question of what is an MVP has many answers. By the way, when I say product, it could be something invented from scratch, but everything we will talk about also applies for new features in an existing product too. Depends what you're working on. Most people refer to the definition of the MVP set by Eric Rice that wrote The Lean Startup. It's an amazing book. Go and read it if you haven't. And his definition is as so. The MVP, the minimal viable product, is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. Again, collect the maximum amount of learning about customers with the least effort. In this case, as you can see below, the skateboard is the MVP. It's minimal, you can test it on people, and it's really easy to make. Now, while this statement is well used in the industry, it could also match the definition of an experiment you're running on your product and not even an actual product. That means that in this version, while allowing to receive customer feedback, you might have some missing functionalities or have an unfinished user experience, which is not a good thing. And you might even consider this as a prototype, and therefore it's not a product. So I prefer to use the definition set by Marty Kagan, which is pretty serious at products, and I really urge you to go and follow him too. And he defines an MVP as so. The MVP is the smallest possible product that has three critical characteristics. People choose to use it or buy it. It's valuable. People can figure out how to use it. It's usable. And we can deliver it when we need it with the resources available. This means the MVP would be the bicycle. The skateboard was just a prototype. The user experience is too basic, and you can't travel very far with it. However, after some changes, you get to something with a real value, a bicycle that you can ride, you can put stuff on it, it takes you a distance, and so on. So basically, the MVP in this definition is a product that has only the core features that make the product work, and its purpose is to test the product demand and to see if people actually want it. Now remember, you need to treat it as a real product that people will use. So not only do you have to search for the minimum viable product, you need to look for the best product experience possible with the resources that you have. This is also because users' expectations change over time. And what they expect in the past, what they expected before, is not what they expect now. For example, today, any social network app would be expected to have a search function, a messaging system, a liking system, and a sharing feature. But 10 years ago, maybe only part of these was enough. Make sure you are aware of the full user experience you want to provide and that it works, of course. If there's competition in the market, it will be a little harder for you because you have to be substantially better than everyone else, but you can still do it. So now you know what an MVP is, but why do you need it? I mean, you can just go and build something for a while and release it, hoping there'll be customers. However, that doesn't help you measure, learn, or even reach any of your goals. It just leaves you with the building part. So let's start with the reasons. First, customer validation. If you want to make a product that people use, you need to validate that there's a need for it. No one wants to build a product that no one wants to use. The MVP helps you focus on what value you bring to the customers. If you manage to solve their needs or their problem, it forces you to clearly define goals and functionality, which will help you waste less time and less money. Second, the MVP allows you to test your hypothesis. For example, you assume that college grads who live alone or with roommates in urban centers don't have a washing machine or will use an app that lets them order and pick up delivery of washed laundry. Now, only if you build a basic experience and let your target audience try it, you'll know if your hypothesis is right, if you're in the right direction, and if it makes sense. The feedback you collect will help you assess the idea. Is it good? Is it bad? Is the user experience good or bad? And so on. The hypothesis is something super important, and we'll touch it later too. Now, when you build an MVP, you need to keep it simple. Extra features may only complicate the user experience and cause a slow release. And our goal is to release fast and cheap. Focusing will help you save resources and test quickly. You don't need to start with a full, expensive team of developers. You can start with one. It might even be yourself. You can start with a small amount of money if you're a startup founder. If your MVP was successful, then you can add money, add developers, and scale it a lot more. In addition, the MVP also lets you take advantage of changes. If you make a large, complicated product that requires time, the user demand could change, or a new competitor could enter the market. And by the time your product is out, it won't be relevant, or you'll have to work a lot harder to catch up. If you work in small batches and something changes, you can adapt to your product to better suit the market and suit any new situation that happens. Next thing is product market fit. The MVP helps you reach product market fit efficiently. Now, product market fit is the holy grail. There are loads of books and websites talking about it. You can go and check it out. We're going to just talk about it briefly here. It's the holy grail. It's an indicator of serious engagement where enough people are using or paying for your product. It means you've managed to answer users' needs, and most of them will be disappointed if they could not use it anymore. And this is something called the Ellis test, where you go and ask your users what would happen if they could not use your product anymore, and go and read about it. And it's super amazing, and I suggest that everyone uses it if they can. Since it can take time and effort to reach this point, the product market fit. Building a scoped MVP helps with minimizing resource commitment and time through the feedback loop, which is what you see in the image here on the right: build, measure, learn. Keep in mind, it doesn't mean that you can go and rest, just that when you reach the product market fit, just that you solve the problem and now you can go on and solve more. The build, measure, learn loop, is very important. And this is the way, by following it, that you will get to an amazing MVP. It helps you build something measure it, and then learn some stuff and then apply them. And we'll dive deep into that very soon. Now to the final point of the slide. The MVP helps you get resources and leadership support. It's easy to go into the CEO's office and ask for something, but if you don't have evidence or good reason for it, there's no reason you'll get it besides a good relationship. That if you have that, it's super important, but you need data and you need evidence for success. Now, proving there's a demand for your product is one of the strongest things you can use. It will lower the resistance for giving you what you need to succeed further. And these are all reasons why you need an MVP. And I hope they were clear because it's very important to try and follow these points. Now, I told you what an MVP is, and now I can tell you what an MVP is not. Take a few seconds to go over these points on the slide. Because now, if you know the MVP is a crucial tool for you in receiving feedback, obviously it has to work properly. A buggy product will not help with this. A product that looks like it was stolen in the middle of work won't help you reach your goals. A product with an amazing user experience that breaks or doesn't give you feedback that something happened will not work for you. A product can look nice, it can work well, and then it can leave the user asking questions about what happened or why he used it. He doesn't know what the value is, or she will not know what the value is of this product. And that will also not promote you to the next steps. Remember, the MVP must help you with customer validation, get feedback fast, and test your assumptions. If it doesn't, you won't proceed with your plans, and you might end up stuck with no funding, which is very sad. Now you can see that the final version of the product here with the car came after a long time, since none of the previous versions could be tested. In that case, you might end up with a really good product. A car is a nice product, I'm sure we all agree, but everyone is already using the competitor's product. And that, my friends, is a big problem. Now, I want to show you a few different types of MVPs. There are many types, but I want to try and focus on the main ones. And maybe you can relate to this. Maybe one of your features is something similar. Maybe a product you're working on is similar to them, and that could help you. So there are different types of MVPs depending on the direction you want to go. So one type of MVP is to solve the user-facing part while manually working behind the scenes. And I assume most of you have heard of Zappos, a website that sells shoes. The founder wanted to check whether people would buy shoes without trying them on. This was a long time ago when you couldn't really buy shoes online. So he simply took photos of the shoes he wanted to sell. And if a customer placed an order on the website, he would go and buy the shoes from the convenient shoe store and ship them. And that worked. People made purchases. People bought a lot of shoes from his website. And these days, Zappos is a large, successful company, and they were recently acquired by Amazon for close to $1 billion. Not bad for a company that started with no real inventory. Now, next example of a different type of MVP is MVP that is intended for a specific user segment. And in this case, we will talk about Tinder, which I'm sure some of you know, or maybe all of you. Now, Tinder's founder, Sean Rudd, said the reason for the dating app creation was his observation that no matter who you are, you feel more comfortable approaching somebody if you know they want you to approach them. So the specific user segment here was people that wanted to meet new people, but were too stressed to do so. So since social networks mostly connected you to people you already knew, there was also a gap for addressing meetings with strangers. Now, Tinder's mobile app was there to fill the gap and decrease stress, since they have this opt-in system that showed you the other party was interested. And usually the geographic location was nearby, which made you feel a little safer. Now, this was back in 2012. Today, 8 years later, Tinder has over 50 million monthly users in 40 different languages, and its valuation is nearing $10 billion. Has paid subscriptions and additional features like a panic button and a web app. I show you that none of these features were in place when Sean started Tinder quite a while ago. He started with a basic experience that solves a problem for specific people and grew into amazing things. One more type of MVP is one that solves a specific problem and use case. And in this case, we'll talk about Airbnb. Now, back in 2008, there was a great design conference in San Francisco. The Airbnb team, which was called Air Bed and Breakfast, yeah, I know, decided to offer their cheap accommodations during this event and posted the information on a simple website. So they went to a specific problem and use case, a conference attendees in San Francisco. They wanted to solve the problem specifically for that use case. Now, within a short period of time, 3 guests were interested in paying for this minimum viable service. And this supported the market insight that potential customers would be willing to pay to stay at someone else's home rather than in a hotel, who wasn't that common at that time. So if they wouldn't have tested, they could have built an extravagant system with all the cool features Airbnb has today, only to find out that people didn't want to stay in other people's homes. But luckily, they do. And I'm sure most of us have already used it at least once. And started from homes and grew into experience and other stuff. The final type is MVP with simple functionality. You could work on an MVP that has one specific functionality that's easy to use, and that will get you places. Now, in this case, I want to talk about one of my favorite products, Spotify. So back in 2006, the music industry was facing a huge challenge. File sharing sites meant that fewer people than ever were paying for music. And 2 Swedish folks realized that adding more laws would never work. So their original idea was to create a free music streaming service and use ads to generate revenue. So many similar streaming services were launched around that time. I'm sure you can remember a few others. So why did they die when Spotify grew on to become worth almost $50 billion? So the reason is that the founders realized that most music streaming startups were investing on flashy websites and apps without testing the idea first. They burned through a lot of funds before realizing that customers didn't want what they were offering for, and then they had to close. So the guys from Spotify took a different approach. They created an MVP in the form of a desktop app that offered one core feature, music streaming. That's all it could do. Later, they added the option for customers to pay a monthly fee to get an ad-free experience and create playlists and other features. And this path allowed them to try out their idea while keeping their investments in check. So Spotify's MVP was initially run on a closed beta group of users to test the market and keep costs to minimum. This approach confirmed that Spotify's idea could succeed, and the service built on this initial success was growing quickly, and they went on to quickly sign up artists, develop a mobile app, and scale up. Now let's see what it looked like. These are 3 milestones in Spotify's history. On the left, you can see one of the first sketches of Spotify. Now, this is a really, really early sketch, and the initial version couldn't be released to a wider audience. It was totally unpolished and had basically no features except the ability to find and play a few hard-coded songs. There was no legal agreement, there was no economic model, but there was an MVP that they put in the hands of real users, which looked like this. And they quickly got the answers they needed. Yes, it was technically possible or feasible, like Marty Kagan said. And yes, people absolutely loved the product. It was valuable. And that is the one here in the middle, as I explained. The hypothesis was validated. This running prototype helped convince music labels and investors, and the rest is history. You can use it on the web, on your PC, on your mobile, Mac, wherever, and listen to whatever you like. Today, which is the version you can see here on the right, is Spotify of 2020, where it has personalized mixes. It's available on all platforms, and it has many other features that give you the best listening experience. And of course, it's amazing. And it has many podcasts and other stuff that weren't even in the original MVP. No one even thought about these things. But that just shows you how from something small you can scale up to something full of features. So that was Spotify. And now that we discussed a bit, what an MVP is, why you need it, and what it looks like. So you have a good background to start work, right? So here you are planning your MVP. Now, to build a proper MVP, you need to define the scope. It's really important to do this and define specific things to work on and what the MVP will include or not. Now, I'll explain by pointing out some important topics you need to address. Now, customer segment basically means that in the most basic form, a customer segment is a group of users with similar traits or characteristics. For example, college grads, community leaders, football fans, and so on. A persona is a representation of a user from a specific customer segment. And then you can drill down into age, location, things they love, etc. Now, SPVG, Silicon Valley Product Group, headed by Marty Kagan, defines a persona as a technique for capturing the important learnings from interviewing users and customers and identifying and understanding the different types of people that will be using your product. Persona is a kind of description of an imaginary but plausible user that personifies these traits, their behaviors, this attitude, and goals. Now, these help you prioritize what's important. It's important to decide who the product is for, but also who it is not for. An extremely common mistake for a product is to try and please everyone and end up with pleasing no one. And there's a famous saying, it says, you can't please everyone, you're not a pizza. That is exactly it. This process can help you prevent this situation. Now, another thing to consider when you're defining a scope is not to fix all the problems at once. You need to separate each individually. This way you will know how a single input affected the output. Problem, solution, so on. Now, it will also help you focus on one core pain point that bothers users the most. Solve that for them, and you can move on to solve other problems. You can't solve all the problems at once. I know I said it many times, but it's super important to understand. It's crucial to understand what is the main problem, the main pain point for your customer segment, and try and solve it for them. That will also make your life easier. Next, the solution. Even after you've decided on the problem you want to solve, after brainstorming, you might have 20 different ideas. It's important to try and drill down to a solution that's feasible and usable and hope it will be valuable. So your best approach would be to decide on the best solution and then what it will include in a method that will allow you to get feedback quickly without spending too much money or resources. If your MVP includes 10 different features that solve the problem and others, that is not good. Remove the non-critical features and focus on the core feature that solves the core problem. That will be your value proposition. Remember that term, it's very important. To also help you focus on the problem and not the solution, which is also something important because maybe someone on your team might offer a better solution than yours. And if you are too invested in your idea, you might lose a great opportunity. Because what's important for us as product managers is to solve the problem with whatever solution we find. Now, the last point is to define the minimal user experience. This means your MVP can't just be viable. It has to be marketable and it has to be user-friendly. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation. Of course, it's not supposed to be perfect. Remember, this is an MVP. But you need to decide and draw the line between a product that can be used and a product that people would use. Say it again, a product that people can use and a product that people would use. Hopefully you'll be on the right side of that line. Now, if your MVP technically works but gives a bad user experience, you'll probably get mostly bad feedback, which won't help you reach your goals. Use the product yourself and with your team and decide what is good enough to release. Now, I just want to summarize these points a little. When you have small iterations and you start with a, a scoped MVP, and then you move on to get feedback, and then maybe fix it or add some other features, you have less work to do for each stage, and you can get feedback after each stage, which is super helpful. Otherwise, you could end up building a product for a long time just to find out the market has changed, the technology has changed, or even the strategy of your company has changed. With a limited pilot, even if your MVP is a disaster, you've narrowed the scope and the audience to a level where you can minimize the damage and eventually keep swinging for success. If your MVP was successful, thumbs up, you have demonstrated there's a demand for the product, something that you can leverage with your company stakeholders. You should launch with core features only, those that are going to prove our hypothesis. Core features should run exactly as they will in the actual product, but any supporting features should be manual or just turned off. This will help you, 1, get to market as quickly as possible, and 2, reduce the noise those additional features will add to your feedback or test results. Moving on to the next stage. So based on the customer segment, problem, and potential solution you identified, how will you know the target user problem has been solved? You need to define what you consider success and measure it. Success means X, or whatever other number you like. Many of your customers use the MVP this often, in these ways, for this long, and are this engaged with it. Now, generally speaking, but you will need to define all these in numbers. Measuring them will help you learn and run another iteration to get an improved version of your MVP. That, my friends, is success. You need to define it. Now, there are so many metrics. How will you know what to measure? There's a tool that can help you, and it's called the funnel. If you outline and understand the user engagement funnel, you can easily identify the meaningful milestones in your product's user journey. Map it into clear steps that can link to each other, and prioritize them to get better insights about how, when, and why customers are using your product. It's also important to create or use a system that allows you to keep testing and measuring during and after launch. It means you should make sure you can track and measure everything about usage. For example, how long it took users to onboard, how often do they use the product, which features do they use, and for what. In addition, you want to measure health. For example, how fast the page loads, did the action work or break your app, and so on. Now, the best thing in this case would be to specify some KPIs. These metrics are known as key performance indicators. Following them will help you collect data about your product and make better decisions. It will also show you what impact any feature or change you make has on a product usage or product health. Keep your tabs on these so you can act fast and get needed support if you need it. In addition, try to decide on the best frequency to measure, for example, every day, every month, and so on. Things like this can affect your product strategy and the MVP's next phases. Finally, try and select metrics that are actionable. Don't measure just for the sake of measuring. but measure so you can look at the data and make better business decisions. Now, that was quite a lot of talking, so let's move on to an example. So here we are with an example of how to define your success. Let's say my customer segment is college grads who live alone or with roommates in urban centers that don't have a washing machine at home or in their building. My hypothesis is that they will use an app that lets them order pickup and delivery of wash laundry. Maybe you know about some app like that that exists where you live, maybe you don't, but this is what we'll focus on as hypothesis. And notice that it includes a few points that we spoke about before. Now, the user funnel will probably be something like this. The users will download the app, move on to signing up or completing onboarding. Then they will move on to a laundry pickup. Then they will probably get it back. And then hopefully they will order again if they had a good experience. Now, notice in most cases, there's a drop-off between each step as users fall out of the funnel. For example, a lot of people might download, not all of them might sign up. Maybe some will sign up, but they won't order, and so on. But by identifying these steps, you can measure what percentage of users move on from one step to the next. Now, significant drops can indicate that maybe one of the steps is broken, maybe it's hard to sign up, maybe no one can find the order button. On the contrary, you can see, for example, that over 50% of your users return to make another order, which is called retention. This shows that your product is successful and maybe even sticking, which means that users are using it again and again and again and again. Something like Facebook, you know. Finally, it's best to select a main metric for success. This depends on your usage funnel, but also on your business model. In our example, let's say we charge the user per order, and let's assume we have a positive ROI, which is return on investment. This means that we make money when the user orders, and the more orders we have, we make more money. In this case, the most important metric, of course, will be the percentage of users that order the service. And everything we do should lead to that metric. This is similar to other companies. For example, Booking.com, the main metric is people who order hotels and so on, but it really depends on the product and your business model. Great. So now after some graphics, we move to the final step of the MVP. But is it really the final step of the MVP? Well, yes and no. When you launch the MVP, you have to remember that it's not a full product. It's a basic, working, valuable version of your product that you're using to test demand. So you start with testing. Get it out to customers as fast as you can. Test it internally with the employees. And collect data as much as possible and see how it works. You can also use A/B testing if you want users to help you pick an alternative. If the button should be here or there, should it be green or yellow, and so on. You should collect both quantitative data, mainly the KPIs we spoke about, the numbers that show you what is happening. But you also need to collect qualitative data, and this is actual feedback from users that show you why things are happening. Qualitative data is also an important part of learning. It helps you get insights that sometimes are hidden from the numbers. Sometimes you see data of things that are happening in your product, but you don't know why. Only when you go and ask customers to answer some questions and explain, then you'll get these answers. Users can also give you more constructive feedback that you can make to use to make changes in your product. And that is super important. You start with an MVP, you get some feedback, you make some changes, you launch an improved version, you get better feedback, and then you continue so on. Okay, and then you move on to launch your MVP, and what is the outcome? So there could be several outcomes. Maybe many people use your product. Amazing. Time to think about the next steps. like increasing audience. Maybe you want to add it to address another customer segment. Maybe you want to add more features. Maybe you want to solve another problem. And that is pretty rare, actually. And you're pretty lucky if that works for you, and it means you're doing well. Now, another option is that not so many people use your product, maybe some people. That is good, but you need to improve. Using the quantitative and qualitative data to decide what needs to be changed and what is the priority for each change is important. Now, in this case, your MVP will look something like this. See these donuts? Start with something that is round and has a hole in it, and that could be anything. Then you move on to create an MVP. So this round thing with the hole is made from dough, and it might be sweet, and people like it. But they told you that they like it, but they're missing something. It doesn't look very appealing. So you add some icing. Then you go get some more feedback. And then they tell you, yeah, that was amazing, but we're missing a touch, or it's not colorful enough. And then maybe you add sprinkles. And this is just an example for one MVP, but like it can be donuts and it could be bicycles and cars. It really could be anything. Now, we said you could have high use for your product and you could have low use for your product, but you also could have no use for your product. Thumbs down. Now, this is not so fun, and I would even say ouch. And what can you do about it? So there are some things you can do about it in case of failure. You might think it's unlikely that your MVP will fail, since you love your idea and you invested so much in it. However, evidence shows that 95% of ideas fail to prove they can keep a sustainable business model. Now, start with remembering this. You still release something, a product or a feature of your own, in a landscape that is not easy. And you can't know in advance if people will know your product. Recently, a company you might have heard of, Quibi, it was supposed to be Netflix for phones, said they were closing down, and they had a lot of money and everyone thought they would use them, but they didn't succeed. So you don't have to invest billions of dollars like they did. You can even invest a small amount, and maybe you won't succeed, but you still launch something in a hard landscape. So remember, you need to be proud of yourself. A lot of people didn't even get to that stage. Now, that said, your solution still didn't work, and most people don't make it the first time. But a good product manager must focus on the problem because there are always more solutions than problems. Remember the key problem or pain point and move to improve your solution or change it completely. Now, when I say change it completely, it could be anything from changing the product feature, from changing the business model. Now, sometimes this thing is called the pivot. Changing some small things is not a big thing, but a failure could also end up with a pivot, which is kind of big. This means you've realized what you're working on is not good enough to solve the problem, and you don't even like the problem anymore. But since you have the data, technology, and customers, maybe you have them all, maybe you have some of them, you can use all of those to go and solve a different problem, possibly for a different target audience. For example, YouTube, yes, YouTube, didn't start as a successful video streaming service it is today. Its early days were not so great. In some ways, it was a video streaming service, but when it started, it was supposed to be this kind of video-based dating service. Did you know that? And they intended that users could upload a short video describing their ideal partner and browse for potential matches. They even had a slogan, tune in, hook up. But anyway, after seeing the potential and becoming a wider and more efficient host of online videos, YouTube completely pivoted and slowly turned itself into an empire that Google acquired for $1.6 billion. So even if you failed, try again and you might succeed. Just try hard. To conclude, above all, The most important thing is to learn. Remember the build, measure, learn loop from the beginning. You have to keep running it as much as possible. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, once said, if you're not embarrassed about your first product, you've launched too late. Now, no one knows what that means, or maybe you do, but what I think it means is that you just need to keep in mind that you keep running the build, measure, learn loop as fast and cheap as possible. And even if your product is not successful, even you're embarrassed, even if it was a failure, just keep on getting feedback, improving it, pivoting if needed, until you manage to succeed. Just keep iterating and implementing what you've learned in previous cycles. With a bit of luck, you'll reach success and you'll have an amazing product. Now, I want to summarize. I hope you all got the sense of what is an MVP, why you need it, what it looks like, etc., and what you need to consider when working on one. So I'll summarize the main takeaways, and hopefully you'll remember them and everything that came before it, of course. The first one is to keep your scope focused. Define your goals, your target audience, your hypothesis, your scope, and your best minimal user experience. These will all help you be laser focused on what you need to do. The second thing is to define success. Design what it looks like, describe the user funnel, and set the metrics you want to measure. And by measuring and checking out what the status is, and by collecting data, you will get to better results, and you can even use these things to leverage other needs you have for the product. And finally, plan the launch. Test your product. Test. Collect data and feedback and plan your next steps. Whether you experience a failure, success, both, something in the middle, the most important thing for you as product managers is to move forward and keep driving whatever product you're working on to the next step. And even if you move on to something else, keep driving and going forward. And that's the essence of it. Anyway, thanks everyone. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I just put the link here in the bottom. And that's it. Have a great day. Bye.